So before I get started, I'm just going to do a land acknowledgement. Volunteer Manitoba is located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene people, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So with that, we're going to start our webinar. We've got two speakers today. I have Nigel Russell from Calgary, and he'll do an introduction of himself, and then Hernand Popper, who is from Winnipeg, and will be giving a presentation as well. So we've got two speakers. With that, Nigel, I think you're good to go, and you can start sharing your screen.
So my name's Nigel Russell. I'm located in Calgary, Alberta, and I work with small businesses, small organizations, and literally anybody else to help them with their cybersecurity needs. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone now. And there we go. I think if I could get a thumbs up from maybe Camilla or Karine, okay, we're good. Okay, perfect. So I've got a few things on today's agenda that we're going to talk about, but if you have any questions at all throughout this presentation, please feel free to enter them into the chat function and I'll answer them at the end of this presentation. We're really here to field your questions, be as specific as possible about how cybersecurity or IT information security intersects with your organization, and Hernan and I will do our best to field your questions. So today we're going to talk about small organization cybersecurity, why it's so important. We're going to talk about the landscape and some of the threats that you may be experiencing at the moment. We're going to talk about why cybersecurity matters. So we're going to talk about the tangible and intangible returns on investment. And then at the tail end of this presentation, we're going to talk about CyberSecure Canada, which is the federal program that I work to develop and promote in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and last but not least, Manitoba. So before we start, I do want to ask the group to engage in a very brief thought experiment with me. So I kindly ask that you ask yourself these questions, and at the tail end of this presentation, we'll come back to these. But I think these are really important questions to ask yourself, and it's questions that we don't typically ask in the not-for-profit or small organization or small business sectors. So really basic questions, but is your organization protected against cyber threats? Why should you take cybersecurity more seriously? How can you show your network that you do in fact take cybersecurity seriously? And God forbid, but what should you do in the event that you do go through a cyber attack? So again, we'll come back to these questions at the end of this presentation. And I will be sharing this presentation deck with Camilla and Karine so that you can leverage this material in the future. So at the end of the day, small organizations and businesses matter most when we talk about cybersecurity. Small businesses and organizations employ represent 98% of all corporate entities and organizations in the country, and they employ 18.8 million people. So small businesses, small organizations, they're what we're really talking about when we talk about increasing cybersecurity protectedness in Canada. And just to give everybody on the line with some perspective about how frequently cyber attacks occur against small organizations and businesses, according to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, about 25% of all small organizations have experienced some relationship to a cyber attack. And that equates to about 61,000 individual firms actually going through a cyber breach. So about 61,000 small businesses and small organizations go through a ransomware attack or their systems are penetrated. So just to give you some perspective about how frequently this actually happens, right? And it's the kind of stuff we don't hear about, but it happens every day. So it's really important to start to think about this kind of thing proactively. And there are three reasons as to why hackers and malicious groups target small organizations in the not-for-profit sector. First is that small organizations store very lucrative information, whether you think it's profitable or not. You may have credit cards on file, you have intellectual property, you have personally identifiable information, you have working agreements with other not-for-profits, with governments, you have contracts saved on file. So these are the kind of things that hackers would love to get their hands on so that they can sell them to other malicious actors, or they can sell them to your competitors, to other governments, or even on the dark web, where they could sell credit card information, identity information, or your municipal contractual agreements, right? So this is the kind of stuff that they're after. And some folks have put it really beautifully, where if you have 1 cent worth of data on your computer, you may be the victim of a cyber attack, right? Because these people only want to extract any financial resources that you may have. A second really important consideration is that small organizations and businesses serve as very easy entry points for hackers and malicious groups. So let's say hypothetically that they want to target the government of Manitoba or a municipal government in Manitoba. They may use your organization as a conduit point to access one of those larger organizations. And a really good example from this comes from Target in the United States, where one of their third-party vendors was hacked in 2014. And through that hack, the malicious actor was able to access virtually all of Target's internal systems. So it's really important to think about cybersecurity as not an individual organization element. It really applies to your broader network. It applies to your supply chain and all of the partners that you work with on a daily basis. And this one is very nefarious, but the third and most important reason to consider as to why hackers may target smaller organizations and businesses is because, generally speaking, they may lack the expertise, the skill sets, and the staff needed to actually respond to the attack. So they know that if they target a not-for-profit in Brandon or in Winnipeg or wherever else, that their odds of successfully extracting information and data from them is a lot higher than if they were to launch an attack against the government of Canada. So hackers are very strategic, they're very intelligent people, and that's why they've increasingly begun to target folks who don't have the resources to respond, and if they go through an attack, they may not know how to respond effectively. So as for some top trends that we're seeing from the government of Canada's lens, we're seeing 3 trends happening right now that may be of interest. So the first one is that hackers are becoming much more sophisticated with the attacks they're launching. So it's not as simple as a very arbitrary email you may receive, and you can immediately detect that it's spam and that you won't click on a link or a downloadable file. They're now impersonating personnel from the Public Health Agency of Canada, from Health Canada, from provincial health departments, reaching out to provide you with support throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Those are the types of attacks that we're seeing today. And so hackers are becoming much more sophisticated and intelligent with the attacks that they're launching. Next, cyber attacks are becoming much more frequent as businesses digitize, right? 3 to 4 years ago, this event would have probably or may have been held in person. But the fact that we're doing this online and that most of our business and most of our operations have shifted to an online medium means that cyber attackers and malicious groups have much more victims to go after, unfortunately. And then the third trend that we're watching is that cyber attacks are becoming increasingly harmful to business continuity. So again, we're seeing one victim being cyber attacked, and then that having a ripple effect within that organization's supply and value chain. So again, it's not just one entity that's being attacked by a cyber criminal, it's that organization's entire network, unfortunately. So on this screen here, you can see some key statistics as to what is happening within Canada's cybersecurity landscape at the moment. And these statistics aren't to scare anyone on the line or to present an overly negative outlook on cybersecurity, but they're here to provide everyone with some perspective and context. This is what we're dealing with currently, right? And it's important to think about what's the solution? How do we proactively engage with this information? So some really important statistics on this screen. 71% of cyber attacks in Canada occur in organizations with fewer than 100 employees, right? And the average cost of these attacks is about $50,000. For those companies who unfortunately have to pay a ransomware payment through Bitcoin or crypto or however else, 60% of them have to shut down, right? Because they don't have, naturally, as a small business, as a small organization, or as a startup, they don't have $50,000 in working capital that they can simply provide to somebody in cash, right? So unfortunately, a lot of them shut down. As for looking about solutions and being proactive, there are some practical steps that we can all take immediately to help us use that information proactively. So 4 practical steps that we at CyberSecure Canada recommend are: take cybersecurity more seriously, right? You don't have to think about it every day, but thinking about it weekly or monthly or during your AGM or during your business continuity planning sessions with your executive team can pay off in dividends if you know what's happening in the ecosystem and what you could do as an organization to mitigate your risk of going through a cyber attack. Step 2 is just assessing what you can practically do to protect your organization, right? What tools do we have at our disposal? What folks do we have in our network that we can talk to, that we can have a conversation with to help us with our cybersecurity needs? Explore cybersecurity certifications when ready as step 3. So if you do want to take it to the next level, there are tons of local cybersecurity consultants like Hernan, who's on the line, who are here to assist you with your cybersecurity needs. And then leverage federal resources on cybersecurity. There are tons of folks who are here at CyberSecure Canada, at the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, who are here to help you with whatever you need. We're very accessible, and we can assist you with your cybersecurity concerns and questions. So when talking about why cybersecurity matters, it can feel very intangible, right? Like, what are the actual benefits of investing into cybersecurity where there isn't a clear return on investment, right? It's not like we're investing into the stock market and we can track our ROI year over year. There are, however, some really straightforward ways that you can calculate your returns on investment when talking about cybersecurity, right? And this applies more so for small businesses and startups, but even within the not-for-profit sector, your executives or even you yourself may want to know what you're actually getting financially from investing into cybersecurity. So there are 4 really key returns on investment worth discussing, and they're reducing business risk, increasing your regulatory compliance in the short run and long run, lowering your recurring costs by reducing your odds of going through a cyber attack, and better meeting your business targets, right? So just ensuring your company or your organization's stability against cybercrime. So again, I'll be sharing this presentation with Camilla and Karine and the Volunteer Manitoba team, but you can actually calculate your returns on investment in cybersecurity, right? So you can quantify, you can measure, you can show your executive team why it might pay to invest $10,000 into cybersecurity over a 10-year period to reduce your odds of going through a cyber attack that may cost you $50,000 to $100,000 in ransomware payments. And again, this happens much more frequently than we would like to think. As for business spending on cybersecurity, and again, this may apply more so for businesses, but it's really important, or it's worth knowing how much the average firm spends on cybersecurity, right? So over the COVID-19 pandemic, companies have begun to invest more into cybersecurity, and about 1 in 4 small businesses have cybersecurity insurance, which is really reassuring from a government perspective. As a proportion of business revenues, and again, this applies more so to businesses because they're in that revenue space, but most companies spend about 0.5% of their revenues on cybersecurity. Yeah, it applies more so for businesses, but just to provide everybody on the line with some perspective on what companies are doing at the moment. As for the intangible returns on investment, so these are the things that we would naturally think about when talking about cybersecurity. And the 3 top intangibles is that it increases your value chain and supply chain management confidence, right? So as a not-for-profit, as a small organization, when you're working with other not-for-profits, when you're working with the city of Winnipeg, when you're working with the Manitoba Institute of Trades and Technology to facilitate a workshop on educating folks about a specific topic, you can leverage your cybersecurity chops to increase the value of that relationship, right? When you're conducting international business and partnership development, you can leverage your cybersecurity chops again when working with partners in the United States, in Europe. If you're building those partnerships, you can tell them that, hey, we've invested into cybersecurity, or we've thought about it, and here's how we've done that, right? These are the kind of things that can really add value to those relationships, especially when working with international partners. And then lastly, this one may seem very self-evident, but it can pay off in spades with your client relationship management and retention, right? So showing your membership, hey, you know that we have your personal information on file, you're paying an annual membership fee to our organization. Rest assured that we've done our due diligence on cybersecurity because we take your information and data privacy very seriously, right? So it's one thing to say that you take it seriously, but when you actually take action and you can demonstrably show that you've invested into it, again, it can pay off in spades. So I've included this slide here to talk about a very common way of thinking about cybersecurity, right? When will it actually happen to me? What are the odds of my organization or not-for-profit actually going through a cyber attack? There's no chance. And unfortunately, if it can happen to huge multinational conglomerates and folks like Canada Post, it may happen to you as well, right? So these guys spend tens of millions of dollars on cybersecurity protection every year, and they even unfortunately go through cyber crime and cyber attacks that cause huge ripple effects through the global economy. So the logic here is just to say, if it can happen to these huge players in business, it may be able to affect your organization or not-for-profit. So knowing all of that, it's really important to be prepared, or at least to have this information on hand. So making cybersecurity top priority, huge to prepare against cybercrime, educating your employees on cybersecurity, right? Letting them know how frequently it's happening, why it's important for your organization, for its success, for its continuity to continue existing in the ecosystem, and then investing strategically in cybersecurity, right? So thinking about all of the options, all of the levers at your disposal so that you can strategically think about where you would want to invest into cybersecurity. So moving on to CyberSecure Canada, which is the program that I work on and develop in Western Canada. CyberSecure Canada, in a nutshell, is a Government of Canada program designed to support small organization and small business cybersecurity across the country. So our certification has 13 areas of compliance that we think all small organizations and businesses should probably think about when looking at their information and data privacy. And we'll touch on those 13 in just a moment. In practice, here's a very succinct kind of one slide synopsis of what CyberSecure Canada is. And it's meant for small organizations who want to take cybersecurity more seriously. That's what we're here to provide. Importantly, CyberSecure Canada is aligned with what's happening in industry and what's happening internationally, right? We were just talking about some of those partnerships with industry and what's happening internationally if you're building international partnerships. So in industry, there are some gold standards in cybersecurity certifications or audits. And my apologies, there are some acronyms on the screen, but those are SOC 2, ISO 27002, the NIST and CMMC series. These are gold standards that most companies will achieve at some point in their maturity model, and even not-for-profits, right? The Conference Board of Canada, for example, they're a not-for-profit charitable research organization. They have completed an industry-aligned gold standard cybersecurity certificate. So folks in the not-for-profit, the small organization space, they also look into these certifications. CyberSecure Canada has been developed also in alignment with what's happening in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, and New Zealand. So those countries have national programs. CyberSecure Canada is Canada's version, right? So we're their country's equivalent of a national cybersecurity audit or certification. And when we compare CyberSecure Canada against some of these certificates, we're essentially Chapter 1. Right? We're not providing a SOC 2 or an ISO 27002 audit, which can be overtly comprehensive and rigorous. We're providing step 1 towards cybersecurity so that it can be as accessible as possible, because we want as many people to start to think about this proactively. So just to reiterate our program goals, we're here to boost Canada's small business and organization cybersecurity. We're here to raise awareness, to provide education sessions, to provide one-on-one training on cybersecurity. And we're here to increase consumers and just everyday people's confidence in Canada's digital economy. And here's how folks actually go through CyberSecure Canada's certification process. So on the screen here, there's tons of information. My apologies with the information overload on this screen specifically, but there are 3 phases as part of CyberSecure Canada. And everything under phase 1 is completely free and freely accessible by all organizations. So step 1 towards getting certified or taking cybersecurity more seriously would be to complete CyberSecure Canada's online self-assessment. It's a very short questionnaire. You'll be asked questions about your cybersecurity. And once you go through that, you'll be connected immediately with one of our certification bodies or auditors. Our auditors have been vetted by my department, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. They've been vetted by the Standards Council of Canada, and they've been vetted by the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. So you know the folks that you're working with have been vetted by dozens of Government of Canada employees to ensure that you're meeting with the top of the top experts in cybersecurity. Following that assessment, where you'll connect with one of our auditors, they'll have a preliminary conversation with you about your cybersecurity needs and to let you know how many areas of compliance in our program you're meeting. If you want to take it to the next level, you could then initiate the certification process. Importantly, there are no contracts, there are no financial obligations, there's nothing. So everything is free, it's come as you go, it's whatever you want to leverage. We're not here to put the certification front and center, we're just here to provide you with the tools should you be interested in using them. And for complete transparency, there is a cost involved with the certification, and it ranges between $2,000 and $5,000. For perspective, audits like SOC 2 and ISO 27002 cost at minimum $20,000 to $25,000. So again, we've come into the ecosystem to present a very accessible first step in cybersecurity.
Nigel, we actually had a quick question in the chat, and I just wanted to ask it because it relates to all of that phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. How long on average does it does that all take for a nonprofit to go through? Or maybe like, what does phase one, how long does it normally take, phase two, and then phase three?
That's an excellent question. So for phase one, if you wanted to complete our online self-assessment, you could do that this afternoon and connect with an auditor tomorrow. That's how fast that takes. And when you have a conversation with one of our auditors, they'll say, hey, Camilla, hey, Nigel, your company or your organization is doing excellent. You're meeting 11 of our 13 areas of compliance. Here's where you need to improve. At that point in time, it'll be on us or on your organization to think about how you want to move forward. What we've seen in the organizations and companies that have completed our certification, some have completed it in as little as 2 to 3 months, whereas others have taken upwards of a year. So it's a huge range, but again, there are no contractual obligations and there's no paperwork, right? So it'll be on your volition as a not-for-profit to assess how much time you have, right? If you have an IT specialist who has cybersecurity knowledge, you may be able to complete the program in as little as 2 to 3 months. But if you don't have a cybersecurity specialist on hand, it may take a little longer. So I hope you like that answer, but we can certainly, please feel free to reach out afterwards and we can have a conversation on what what your organization's needs are. But short answer is that it varies, as little as 2 months, upwards of a year.
Perfect. And then we just had one more question related to all this certification. Is what ongoing cybersecurity related costs should a nonprofit consider having in their budget in relation to cybersecurity? Like, you know, you put in the cost, you know, $2,000 to $5,000 for that certification, but is there ongoing costs that we should set aside as nonprofits?
That's an excellent question. So the $2,000 to $5,000 is payable to the auditor for the certification itself, right? But as for ongoing costs, we can touch on those in just a second here, but they largely relate to your IT expenditures, right? So where are you spending your money on IT, and then assessing where cybersecurity fits within that space. So do you have cybersecurity insurance? Do you invest into anti-theft and anti-fraud software for your computers? Do you have VPN software that you've purchased for all of your enterprise-related devices? So I don't have estimates on that one. That's a really good question. Doesn't come up every time, but yes, that's a great question. Whoever asked that, please feel free to reach out. Would love to get to know you and to learn more about your organization and to talk about some of those ongoing expenses. Very good question.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nigel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So coming back to these areas of compliance, I mentioned them a few times now, but here's what we look for in companies or organizations who want to achieve the CyberSecure Canada certification. So as you can see on your screen, some of them are more qualitative and then others are more quantitative or technical, right? And some of the more qualitative worded requirements that we look for are having an incident response plan. So what are your immediate steps and strategy to cope with a cybercrime event should you go through it? And then employee awareness training as another example. But yes, so these are the 13 areas that we look for organizations to adhere to in order to receive the CyberSecure Canada certification. But to assist you in achieving these areas of compliance or working towards CyberSecure Canada, there are CyberSecure Canada's online e-learning modules. So our team has released 14 online modules. They're essentially PowerPoint and interactive presentations that you can go through at your free time. They're freely accessible. And we have 9 customizable, downloadable templates that you can leverage. So we've got tons of learning materials online. And this is even for the folks who don't want to go through the certification. Let's say you just want to learn more about cybersecurity, you can leverage these modules. That's what they're there for. And as for a recommended learning pathway, we've separated it into 5 categories. So there's the introduction to the certification, automatically patching your operating systems and applications, securing your devices, developing that incident response plan, and then how to provide employee awareness training. Importantly, in the modules that we've developed, we specifically delineate the steps needed to do these things. So we don't just talk about them, we provide you with the tools, the toolkits, the clear instructions on what to do. With that said, these are here to support and supplement your needs on cybersecurity. They may not provide you with all of the answers you're looking for, but they should provide you with enough information to move forward with CyberSecure Canada and taking cybersecurity more seriously. Another really important thing about our program is that you have tons of access to expertise. So you've got program experts like myself, and then you have technical experts. We've got a large team in Ottawa comprising engineers, cybersecurity specialists, and software developers who are here to field your questions on cybersecurity, should you have any. And then importantly, myself and my colleagues, we're here to connect you to our auditors or certification bodies and local cybersecurity specialists who have region-specific knowledge, right? So they may have that regional, that local intelligence in Winnipeg, in Calgary, in Vancouver, that folks elsewhere may not have by virtue of just not being in that same city with you. So wrapping everything up with CyberSecure Canada, there are 3 main value propositions here. So the first one is that CyberSecure Canada is the only federally designed and supported certification in Canada. It is a very accessible entry point into cybersecurity when we're comparing it against some of those industry gold standards. And it can be used very strategically for your business development activities, right? When you're working with new not-for-profit partners, when you're working with new governments, with the government of Canada, you can leverage CyberSecure Canada to add value to those relationships and to the discussions that you're entering. So I promised we'd come back to these questions, and here we are. So we're coming full circle back to these questions that I asked the group to ask yourselves at the beginning of this presentation. So the first question, is your company or is your organization protected against cyber threats? Easy way to see whether you are or not. Complete CyberSecure Canada's online self-assessment. It takes about 30 minutes to complete. And again, you'll be connected with a Government of Canada vetted cybersecurity specialist. So I would highly recommend that just to learn more about where your organization resides on cybersecurity. On the second question, why should you take cybersecurity more seriously? Hopefully throughout this presentation, you picked up some nuggets of information and some more knowledge on why cybersecurity matters a lot right now, especially during the pandemic and since we're still all virtual and digital. But I'd recommend looking at your intangible returns on investment, looking at those quantifiable returns on investment and how they apply to your organization's long-term business continuity planning. On showing your network how you take cybersecurity more seriously, or how you take it seriously, you can show them that you've completed CyberSecure Canada's online e-learning modules. You can tell them that you've connected with CyberSecure Canada or a local cybersecurity specialist to talk about your cybersecurity protections. And in the event that you do go through a cyber attack, the RCMP has launched an anti-fraud center where they have cybersecurity specialists who are there to assist you with whatever you need. And their top recommendation is to immediately contact the RCMP and its RCMP anti-fraud center, and to not contact the cyber criminal who may have penetrated your system. And again, I'll be providing Camilla and Kavin with this presentation deck that includes links to everything you need. So hopefully this presentation can serve longer term value for your organization. As for my 4 top takeaways, if I were to have been on the other side of the veil today, be mindful of cybercrime. It can pay off in spades if you do your due diligence, or at least think about cybersecurity once a year at your AGM. It can really pay off. Thinking tactically about cybersecurity is also very strategic, right? So investing as little as $15 to $20 a month into VPN software through apps like Surfshark or NordVPN or something like that to scramble your VPN, right? There are some very tactical things that you can do to improve your cybersecurity posture. 3, assess your IT expenditures on cybersecurity, right? You're already investing something into cybersecurity, whether you know it or not, through TELUS or Shaw or Bell or whoever your internet service provider may be. So assess what you're spending on IT and then see where you can fit in cybersecurity, right? If you've got an extra $50 a month, where could that go, right? And then leverage federal expertise and funding where appropriate, right? So you've got the CyberSecure Canada team to leverage. We have tons of experts. We have the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, the RCMP Anti-Fraud Center, and all of our teams have been mandated to support the ecosystem. So our job is to help folks like you in better understanding cybersecurity and to use all of the tools that we have, right? So that's what we're here for. So again, here's my contact information. There are tons of useful links in this presentation that I'll share with the Volunteer Manitoba team. And maybe I'll end it here. So thank you everybody for watching my presentation.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nigel. I do have 2 questions actually in the chat. The first question is, the government-approved cybersecurity experts, who are they certified by? Do you know?
Yeah. So so currently we have 4 certification bodies or our auditors. So these companies, these auditors are basically companies. These companies applied to work with the government of Canada to become accredited certification bodies. And they were vetted by the Standards Council of Canada, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, which includes a component from CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. So they've been vetted by dozens of public servants through a 3 to 4 month process. So hopefully that answers your question, but they've been vetted by executives, directors, technical experts, business experts, all within the government of Canada. So rest assured, we have carefully vetted these folks to ensure that they're the best set of people to work with you.
Perfect. And then the last question that we've got is, if we cannot invest as much as we'd like in cybersecurity, is there a site listing current risks and advisories? Like, is there a link that in the PowerPoint that we can direct people to?
So that's a good question. Let me think about that one a little bit more, but more than happy to connect with whoever asked that question to talk about that more specifically.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Nigel. I don't think there's I just checked. There's no other questions in the chat. So I think we're going to pass it along to Hernan.
Excellent. So hopefully you can see my screen and you can hear me okay? Is that right?
We see it, yeah.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Canada and Volunteer Manitoba and Corinne and Nigel for inviting me to have a couple of words and a couple of slides for you. I did take a couple of notes during Nigel's presentation. And the first thing I should say is kudos, congratulations to everyone attending this webinar today, because, well, you know you need to do something, you are starting to do something. You wouldn't believe how many organizations out there are completely oblivious to what's happening out there for small organizations and how drastic those situations could be. And the one thing that I should say, I went through all the training with CyberSecure Canada. I think that the program is absolutely amazing. I encourage everyone to go through those e-learning series. Now, I do have a little bit of a different view when it comes to cybersecurity, and this may address some of the questions that were asked before. When we are talking about cybersecurity, we are not only talking about viruses or penetration attacks or website hackings. My main concern when talking about cybersecurity is people. And although it is covered in the CyberSecure certification, I do want to emphasize that the weakest link is always people. And that's why I wanted to add a couple of slides specifically about this topic and about the challenges that you might be facing. I happen to work quite a bit with non-for-profit organizations in Manitoba, some of them small, some of them really large. And I've seen some commonalities among them. And I thought, well, if this is happening for some of these organizations, quite possibly it's a good discussion to have with attendance today. Now, a couple of notes that also I took during the presentation before is with regards to expenses. How much do you have to estimate that it will cost? Well, I go back to one of the numbers that Nigel shared, that 60% of organizations will fall after an attack. So the expenses are always going to be significantly lower than the cost of actually going through a breach or going through some kind of cyber incident. The other piece is when you think about cybersecurity and how much to spend on it, I would say, well, we all have fire insurance, but it's not that usual that we have fires out there. And you can have as much insurance as you want. The question is, how much cyber insurance do you have today? If you don't have any cyber insurance policy currently for your organization, please, please, when we are done with this webinar, contact your insurance broker and ask about it, because it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. And you want to get that insurance before it happens, because the cost, if not, could be significant. So that's my big thing for today. Definitely, if you don't have cyber insurance, that's something that you want to have as soon as possible. Now, with regards to these slides, just let's make sure that, okay. So again, I have quite a bit of experience in this business and in previous businesses with the non-for-profit industry. And I split these challenges into three different areas. The first one is about people or people challenges, specifically for non-for-profits. We all know that staffing is a big challenge for non-for-profits. Usually salaries in the non-for-profit industry are not the same as in the private industry, and there is a lot of churn, a lot of people joining and leaving the organization. And in most cases, what I've seen is that there is no clear process or policy for offboarding staff. So if your, let's say your accountant were to leave today, do you have a process in place to look for every single system that she or he would have access to and close those accounts? Do you have a process if you are using a cloud solution to check who has access to those applications? And well, what you would do if they leave? It is really, really usual to have lots of credentials out there in your systems in the cloud from people who hasn't been with the organization for many, many years. The second topic is about lack of cybersecurity training and policies. Do you currently have a program to train your staff on what to do when they receive a phone call saying that it's from the government, or saying that it's from Manitoba Health, or if they receive an email from any of the different funding organizations? As I started my idea, the weakest link in cybersecurity is always the people. And if you don't have a program to train them on an ongoing basis and to test that the training is working, that's how the breach is going to start. When it comes to volunteer management, again, this is something I've seen over and over. Let's say, for example, that you have fundraising volunteers and you give them cards in order to call the usual donors, in order to ask for the same donation as last year. What kind of information is being shared about that donor? What is the process when you finished with all those cards or with all those pieces of information that you gave to the volunteers to destroy that information? What happens if the information that you are sharing with your volunteers were to be leaked? Well, again, when you are dealing with volunteers, you need to have a clear process on how to manage the information about donors and also about beneficiaries. Your organization might be helping people with disabilities or animals, or I mean, could be any area, but in many cases you have private information about your beneficiaries, about your participants. Do you provide any access to your volunteers to this information? If so, how do you control that this information is managed properly? Also on volunteer management, in many cases, in order to do their work or in order to perform their tasks as volunteers, they may have access to corporate services, like, for example, an email from your organization, or just accessing your Razor's Edge screen, or any other application that, well, you have to give them credentials, username and passwords. Well, those could all be threat vectors or attack vectors in order to access those services and get confidential information leaked. And then privileged information. What information are you sharing with your volunteers with regards to your organization? Like what kind of processes you have in place that any information that you share, well, is kept confidential. So, and again, these are just topics to steer the discussion and things that I've seen that may be a possible way of entry for the bad actors, the bad guys. When it comes to technology challenges, many non-for-profit organizations are outsourcing their IT to a third party or to an MSP. And in some cases, it's just one person, one staff, or sometimes it's just a volunteer who's taking care of the IT configuration, the IT network, the computers. When it comes to IT, and this is something really to consider, in most of the cases, these managed service providers, these IT educated professionals, they will think about the devices and they will talk about antiviruses or anti-malware. They will think about the networks and they will talk about firewalls, but they may minimize or just ignore the human factor. And that is, how do you protect your people from opening doors or opening opportunities for the bad actors to get into your network? 95% of the attacks will start with a staff member or someone within the organization doing something wrong because they were not trained on it. When it comes to mobile devices, my background before jumping into cyber some years ago was in telecom. This is a big topic that you may or may have not considered. If you are letting your, sorry? That's my announcement for the next webinar. Let's say that you allow your staff, not the volunteers, but your staff to use their own cell phones in order to access confidential information or even to check their emails. Well, those cell phones that belong to the staff member or to that person may contain privileged information, and you don't control that information. Those emails are sitting in their personal phones, or those emails may be leaked if they use those phones for other activities. In the case that you're actually paying for your cell phones, do you have a mobile management solution in order to control what happens with our phones? Let's say that you have provided your staff with cell phones because you want to be able to manage those bills or control the usage, or you just don't want to mix personal and business information. How do you wipe a phone if one of those staff members leave and they don't return the phone? What happens if they lose the phone? How do you wipe the information? How do you secure those credentials or that information that is sitting currently on those phones? So either, even if you, either bring your own device or company-owned mobile devices, definitely it's something that you want to look into, because those could also be big opportunities for information leak. And the business challenges, reputational risk. Uh, I'm not, I don't know whether you've seen this or not, but it's happening every day more and more, where the bad actors are impersonating fundraising emails and asking for money. And they are using your logos, they are using spoofed donation pages that, well, someone who's been supporting your organization and giving money on a recurring basis may click there and may send that money to someone else, or may open their computer to viruses or to malicious links because it came from your organization. These days, it's trivial to spoof an email address or to spoof a donation page or even your own page. And when your donors see an email that seems to be coming from you, well, they will open it because they care about what you do. Another business challenge is also included as one of the key topics in the CyberSecure certification, which is the incident response plan. Does your organization have an incident response plan? And again, this is not IT, this is business. What would happen if you get tomorrow someone to click on a link and to actually expose their credentials to one of your services? Or what would happen if suddenly you are told by your donors that every single donor has been contacted because your donors database has been leaked or has been breached? Do you have a plan? Do you know what to do? The thing is that if you don't have a plan, well, this is going to happen. Sooner or later, you are going to go through some kind of incident, and it's better to have that plan and to know exactly what to do, and not just at that time trying to get some solutions. And the plan, again, is not about IT. What do I do with my backups? The plan is, what do I do with the information? Do I need to call RCMP? Do I need to call a lawyer? Do I need to call the regulating body? Do I need to communicate with my donors, my participants, because their private personal information has been leaked? All this information should be part of your incident response plan. And finally, as a business challenge, we all know that in the non-for-profit world, you're always dealing with the same challenge of lack of resources, either time or staff or of funds. There's never enough on any of those. The problem is that when you are dealing with cybersecurity or with an incident, there is no time once it happened. So how can you leave this presentation today with the idea that you can start doing something today, even if you as the executive director or the CEO or the CFO don't have the time, even if you don't have the people to do it for you, or even if you don't have the funds? In every case, these topics should be discussed, and there are ways to start to improve your footprint with no cost at all. So those were the topics that I wanted to mention today. And I just left a very last slide just to mention who we are. My firm is Popper Cybersecurity. It's a boutique cybersecurity consulting firm based in Winnipeg, and we help small and medium-sized organizations in their cybersecurity. Again, I would not, I want to make sure that everyone leaves this presentation 100% aware that there are opportunities to start working on your cybersecurity plan right away. And definitely, I encourage everyone to go through the CyberSecure online self-assessment. That is a perfect starting point for this need. do we have any questions?
We do have one question in the chat, and it can be for you and Nigel. What kinds of things does cybersecurity insurance cover that your financial institution fraud insurance wouldn't cover?
So maybe I would, Hernan, do you want to take this one?
Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say I'll defer to your expertise actually, or judgment on this one. But I've met with a few small businesses, especially who have invested into cybersecurity insurance, but they failed to closely read the contracts that they signed. So oftentimes when you do sign up for cybersecurity insurance, your insurance provider will expect you, similar to owning a car or owning a home, that you do your due diligence in making sure that it's safe. So they'll have some expectation that you're keeping your software systems and your computers and your devices somewhat safe. But all that to say, some of them have gone through a cyber attack, but because they didn't do their due diligence or what they were supposed to in adherence to their contract, their insurance provider did not provide them with the ransomware payment that they had to pay. So cybersecurity insurance, super important. And like Hernan said, would definitely recommend you having a conversation with your insurance provider about, but it's really important to know what you're signing up for. But in essence, they're there to support you should you ever go through a ransomware attack or an extremely burdensome attack where you don't have $20,000 plus in cash to send, right? So that's what they're there to help with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to add to that, there are two different kinds of cybersecurity insurance policies. The first one, it's usually around $25,000 to $50,000 in coverage that you would get with your standard business insurance. And that is mostly for dealing with reputational damage. Like, how do I pay for the real immediate steps that I need to do in order to protect my organization's reputation? So a communication plan, connecting with the law enforcement if needed, connecting with lawyers if needed. So that's kind of something that is almost included, or it's included in a number of standard business insurance policies. When it comes to ransomware or to reputation protection, the cost could be way, way higher. Well, Nigel, based on their numbers, they estimate that an average cost could be around $50,000 for an incident. That could be also $1 million, and it could be anywhere. So the bad actors, the bad guys, as we call them in the industry, they would go after every single opportunity they have to make a buck or to steal a penny. So when it comes to cybersecurity, the discussion with your broker should be, what else do I need on top of just the very basic PR funds that will be provided? The other piece that Nigel mentioned that is really important, and this is something that is happening right now in the industry, one of the requirements for cyber insurance policies is to train your staff. If you cannot demonstrate that you've been training your staff on a regular basis on how to react against social engineering or any kind of cyber attacks, then they won't even sell you the cyber insurance policies. So definitely, as Nigel indicated, they will expect you to do your best to avoid any kind of breaches. You know how insurance works. Well, if they can find a way not to pay, well, they'll do it. So
Yeah.
you need to be sure to get insurance, but also to have some plan in place or some process in place that you start ramping up your security.
Awesome. So the lesson is, read the fine print and to ask those worst case scenario questions. And with that, thank you very much, Hernan and Nigel, for doing this presentation, for coming here today. It was really lovely to have you both here, and hopefully we'll get to work with each other sometime soon, or we'll send questions your way. You might get some emails sent your way, and hopefully make some good connections and be helpful for people. So with that, thank you very much for everyone that attended today, and we will hopefully see you all sometime soon.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for attending.